This is TWiT.
I think the inflection story is really interesting.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So tell us about the Inflection and Microsoft story.
Inflection is a company that was backed by a bunch of people, including Microsoft and Reid Hoffman, and it started the chat called Pi, which is supposed to be more human and more empathetic and more interesting. And what's his name? Mustafa Suleyman, right? Founder of DeepMind, was the head of, I can't forget the name of it, Inflection. And then today came out an announcement where what I saw was Inflection announcing they had a new CEO because the CEO was going to Microsoft. And as you look at all the stories, what turned out to be is that, and you can read about this at the information, or you can ask your favorite chat GPT to steal it for you.
Oh, snap. Them's just fighting words.
The lines are drawn.
Ooh. So what happened is that Microsoft, as you remember, wanted to have a new AI division. And it was going to be Sam Altman in the 1 hour when he wasn't the CEO of OpenAI. And then he was back at OpenAI, and we didn't hear anything about that. But Microsoft was figuring out it needed an AI division to make sure they hedged their bets with OpenAI. So they managed to hire much of the staff, almost all the staff of Inflection, starting with Suleyman. So they now have a head of Microsoft AI. What happens to Inflection, you might ask? Well, it pivots to something else with a smaller staff, with a new CEO who used to be the head of R&D at Mozilla. And Reid Hoffman wrote about this, tweeted about this, and he was obviously the puppeteer behind this deal. And the deal's really kind of amazing because the Reid at Greylock and Microsoft and the investors in Inflection are being made whole, apparently, by licensing deals to Microsoft. Rather than a purchase, it appears from what the information tells me, but here I am stealing the information and sharing it with you for free because that's the kind of bastard I am. So the information informs me. Actually, I'm plugging the information right now. I'm doing exactly what Google does. I'm saying, go buy an information subscription. It's where I found the best information. So they're going to make the investors whole, but the investors also keep their same equity in Inflection. And if Inflection grows or sells or does other things, they will benefit again. Meanwhile, Microsoft gets the best possible people they can for Microsoft AI, and Suleyman gets a great job. It's a pretty weird, amazing deal that occurred here. So it just kind of came out very quietly, and I found it fascinating.
I'll be honest, I did kind of lose the thread there between the veiled attacks. Paris?
I mean, it seems like what has happened is Microsoft hollowed out Inflection because it got most of their senior staff. At the same time, Microsoft is doing a licensing deal. Here, I'll read from the story. At the same time it revealed the staff departures, Inflection disclosed a licensing deal with Microsoft to make its models available for sale on Microsoft's Azure, and said other cloud platforms would follow. Inflection has also told investors they will fully recoup their investment and more as a result of the licensing agreement. It's unclear whether what the size of the payout will be, and whether it will come in a lump sum or over time. In addition to the payout, investors will keep their equity in Inflection, ensuring that they can profit if Inflection is bought or goes public, which is a really interesting setup where it's like Microsoft gets all the good stuff of Inflection and investors recoup their investment but still hold equity in the skeleton of Inflection in case something comes of it.
With a new CEO who people respect.
Yeah.
And then it pivots. I think it basically becomes that job title I was making fun of before. I think it becomes the LMOPS, whatever.
Yeah.
Where it becomes a kind of product integrator person thing for LLMs.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Something that is interesting. Yeah. Jeff, how do you feel about the kind of consolidation we're seeing in the AI industry?
That comes back to the kind of clutch moment I had watching NVIDIA, where if big remains everything in AI, then that kind of, you have to have the most data, the most power, the best brains, the most money. then AI becomes the province once again. If you're talking, I think before where Paris, with respect, your reflex to trouble was let's regulate. Not necessarily my first response, but
enemy of regulation, here. Jeff Jarvis would have some other thoughts.
I want smart regulation. I just don't want dumb regulation.
I want smart regulation that incorporates the opinions of the companies being regulated.
Well, that's an issue. And so what's going to happen here, I think, is that the lesson we should learn in any case is if we let things get consolidated in a few bigs, we're a problem. Now, this is where I think the fact that Meta started the track going of open sourcing Llama, and Gemini open source, and Europe didn't forbid open sourcing, which would have been really awful. So the question is, how can we? And there's what's the French one? Mistral, which is fairly open source. How can we put resources behind all of that? And if the administration believes they're going to throw money behind things, they just put $8 billion into an Intel chip fab. Maybe they should be investing in smaller, competitive, open source AI work in universities and institutions, which again is happening in Norway. Why can't we be Norway? That's my.
I don't know if you saw my colleagues at The Information posted a story, I guess, right as we jumped on to record this, that Cohere, the OpenAI competitor, apparently they were generating about $13 million in annualized revenue at the end of last year, which means that they, in 1 month at the end of last year, generated only about $1 million in revenue, which seems very small to me. It seems like many of the companies in this sector are still incredibly immature.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I still don't understand how OpenAI gets the revenue it gets, because how it's really used. It's not really, really, really useful as a model. I don't think it's a toy still, unless we talk. This is where Leo has to set me straight.
Leo's like Lisp. Yeah.
I honestly.
Do you pay for ChatGPT to run your Dungeon Master?
I do, actually. Yeah. So I paid for it in the first place because I wanted to, whenever it first started adding new stuff, we were talking about it a lot. I wanted to show the new features that it has. Now it's kind of mostly familiar with everybody, but I do get value out of it outside of just the Dungeons and Dragons stuff. Especially when it comes to creating new automations and things that I do.
Wait, do you disclose this to your fellow players?
Yes.
Okay.
That
would you consider that to be an ethical requirement to do so?
I don't know. I think if I was playing online in front of like an audience, that would be necessary probably. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if you were playing in front of an audience, maybe. But I also think a lot of people use modules for D&D, which for those who I guess don't know, modules are kind of like a pre-written campaign structure. It's a book that could have everything you want to know about a particular world or an adventure, and you kind of base your game around that. And this is similar. I mean, what is it drawing from your ChatGPT?
Mine actually is drawing partially from modules, as well as information.
Did you pay other people for them?
Yeah, you have to buy them. It's from.
Okay.
Yeah, it's from
Wizards of the Coast.
It's from Wizards of the Coast
listening,
specifically. Yeah.
Don't turn off.
You have to. Well, you got. Yeah, that's where the adventure came from. So that is owned by Wizards of the Coast, or that's where I've purchased that from. And then parts of that also have come from individual creators, when I've added different things to the story. And then of course there's stuff that I've added myself and that's the hardest part, because if it's something that I've created myself, like this is maybe a long, goes into the weeds, but essentially there was a part of the campaign where my players needed to learn how to use griffins to fly from one place to another. And so on the spot, I just came up with this whole set of instructions that this sort of grouchy person was teaching them how to do. And so I'm writing it down in the moment as I'm inventing what the rules are for learning how to fly and train griffins. And I needed that to end up into it. So having to kind of take all of that and summarize it and put it together and make it so that the thing new is a lot harder than just taking the PDF that you've purchased, the 2-page PDF about a specific location that you purchased, and just uploading that into the system. So
that's so interesting.
When it comes to I think if I ever, so I do play in a campaign that is made available to the public. It's part of the Incomparable Network, which is friend of the network, Jason Snell's network. And he has a podcast series called Total Party Kill. And there are many different adventures. And I think that if I was the dungeon master on there and I was using ChatGPT, that probably would be something I would disclose in that case, just again because it's public facing. But yeah, I don't know that it's necessary in private per se.
I mean, I think also I don't even know that it would be, because I listen to a lot of popular like actual play podcasts and whatnot. For instance, when I listen to his Not Another D&D podcast, and often the DM on that will go into kind of in their after show, oh yeah, I kind of based this monster off of something from Kobold Press, which is a third party.
Yeah.
I mean, all of
we're not required at the beginning
curbing off of other things.
You're absolutely right. And there's no set of rules where at the very beginning of any new thing we go, I purchased this from, it's a little bit like robots.txt. So I worked to raise money for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital with the Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And as part of that, it was a live stream where they would make donations, and depending on the size of their donation, they could impact the game in a certain way. So you could pay.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun because people would pay amount of money to like bring a monster into the campaign or bring an adventurer to join my players. And I chose to, but was not required to, start out by saying, by the way, this epic level adventure is from this person. You can buy it here. And, I've adapted it as such. And then I also did one that wasn't a money-raising venture. And it was How the Lich Stole Christmas. But I didn't want it to be Christmas because I had one player who was Jewish and was a practicing Jew, and I did not want them to feel like out. And so I completely changed the name, How the Lich Stole Mirthmas, but I also made it clear this comes from this adventure, and we took it and adapted it. There's a lot of adaptation that goes on, and I think there's a lot of just general, it's all good. And really, it's only ever been since Hasbro came into it that things have gotten particularly messy. And you may have seen, I don't know, Jeff, if you have any attention in this space, but you may have seen, and maybe Paris, you did see, when Hasbro did try to change,
when they tried to change the creative, kind of their version of Creative Commons licensing.
And
specifically, what is interesting here is like D&D, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just kind of riffing off what I remember from whenever this was. D&D has always had some sort of licensing structure. The thing I had mentioned earlier about like a DM of a popular show saying, oh, I got this monster from something called Kobold Press. That's a third-party company that exists to make, like, let's say monsters or NPCs or campaign modules that fit into the world of Dungeons and Dragons, a system owned by a company called Wizards of the Coast, which is now owned by Hasbro. And they're able to do that because of a specific kind of licensing structure that says, like, hey, you can create content in our universe using our rules and whatnot. That's totally fine. But they tried, the community was in an uproar sometime last year, I believe, because they tried to change it essentially to get larger companies that have popped up where their whole business model now is creating content in these worlds using these rules and saying if you make over, I think, some X amount of millions of dollars, you have to pay licensing fees. And people were up in arms. I mean, it's kind of a similar issue in regards to copyright that we talk about in the show all the time with tech products.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, very quickly, it becomes I would argue a fair use what is the exact term? It's not alteration, right? It's or is it alteration? What is the verb?
Transformative.
You want a transformative use.
Yeah, it very quickly becomes transformative use the moment that any one of your players does anything, because that is not at all written into, what the adventure provides. And so, and you have to react to that. That's the cool
so they become a co-creator then. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So which
is something we don't account for enough in a world where we can collaborate far more than we ever could before.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And something I think that is interesting, because someone in the chat while we were talking about this posted like, "Oh, I'm surprised D&D is still even a thing anymore." D&D is a huge business. One of I think, as Patrick rightfully pointed out, the top creator on TWiT for the last many years is this company Critical Role that makes tens of millions of dollars every year just by running live stream D&D campaigns on a weekly basis.
TWiT or Twitch?
On Twitch. Not Twitch.
I was going to say, if Leo was making millions of dollars to that, he'd be fine. He'd stop pushing for the club.
Similar but different.
Hey, it's Leo Laporte. I hope you enjoyed this little snippet from our show This Week in Google. For the full show, you can either go to our website, twit.tv/twig, or find Twig in your favorite podcast client. And, of course, there's links right below, somewhere down there, for more information.